Hello, I am Doug Kamholz. My wife Sheila Walk and I are here for yet another celebration of our beloved Abraham Lincoln.
Here is Springfield's Amtrak station, which has an historic connection to Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln's funeral train arrived here at this spot after a trip of 1,600 miles over 13 days. Some 7 million people left their homes to go out and witness the funeral train passing by. A quarter of all the people who lived in the United States in 1865. It is said that for some of those people, to see the funeral locomotive go by was a way for them to come to peace with the grief for their own lost loved ones killed in the recent Civil War, loved ones whose remains would never come home. The great American poet Walt Whitman had only a nodding acquaintance with Lincoln, as the president often rode his horse past Whitman's house in Washington. Whitman, though, had a great love for this man. Whitman's sadness at the April death of Lincoln is expressed in a poem that speaks of the train that brought his murdered body to this station in this city where his soul was to repose forever. Sheila will now read selected verses of that work.
When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed by Walt Whitman. When lilacs last in the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early drooped in the western sky in the night, I mourned, and yet shall mourn, with the ever-returning spring. Ever-returning spring, Trinity, sure to me you bring lilac, blooming perennial, drooping star in the west, and thought of him I love. Over the breast of the spring, the land, amid cities, amid lanes, and through old woods where lately the violets peeped from the ground, spotting gray debris. Amid the grass in the fields each side of the lanes, passing the endless grass, passing the yellow-speared wheat, every grain from its shroud in the dark brown fields uprisen, passing the apple tree blows of white and pink in the orchards, carrying a corpse to where it shall rest in the grave. Night and day journeys a coffin. Coffin that passes through lanes and streets, through day and night with the great cloud darkening the land, with the pomp of the in-looped flags, with the cities draped in black, with the show of the states themselves as of crepe-veiled women standing, with processions long and winding, and the flambeaux of the night, with the countless torches lit, with the silent sea of faces and the unbared heads, with the waiting depot, the arriving coffin, and the somber faces, with dirges through the night, with the thousand voices rising strong and solemn, with all the mournful voices of the dirges poured around the coffin, the dim-lit churches, and the shuddering organs where amid these you journey with the tolling bells' perpetual clang. Here, coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac.
For several years, I worked as a volunteer for the National Park Service. They operate the historic site of Lincoln's home, a few blocks over my left shoulder. We would ride the Amtrak train from here to Chicago and back, talking to passengers about the history and the present of our trip, telling them what was out the window of the train and what was along the tracks. Coming from Chicago, I set up in the big windowed observation car. I had my microphone in front of me, a table with a clutch of artifacts. Because we traveled the same rail bed over this same route as Lincoln's funeral train, I read aloud the Whitman verses you have just heard. One day, facing me from the booth beyond mine was a young African American, a man about 30, wearing a fine Chicago Bulls cap and jacket. Like many of his age, he quickly focused not on my narration, but on his handheld device. When it came time for the Whitman verses, I opened my notebook, took my microphone in hand, and looked down at the page to read. When I finished, I looked up to see the man was crying and telling me how powerful those words were. Here is Sheila to repeat a few of them for you.
When lilacs last in the dooryard bloomed, I mourned, and yet shall mourn with ever-returning spring. Amid cities and through old woods, amid the grass and the fields with countless torches lit, with the waiting depot, the arriving coffin, and the somber faces. Night and day journeys a coffin, carrying a corpse to where it shall rest in the grave. Here, coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac.